what happens.
Yeah. All right. Sorry, everybody. So we'll get started. And welcome. The sort of idea behind this is to try and look at how we interact on video in comparison to text. So the text group that we'll be using basically mimics any sort of social media, and then we're going to see after, you know, we're going to meet here, and then we're going to have people interact in the forum, and then we'll meet back at the end of it and see if any of the issues that came up in that time are issues that that we can resolve face to face. So I don't know, Alice, is there anything you want to add to that?
Yeah, let me just give you a little introduction about who I am. As I said, I've been a psychiatrist and psychoanalyst in Manhattan for about 45 years. And during that time, I work with one individual at a time. And they're dramatically different people, but I understand how they got to be who they are. In recent decades, our political conflicts have gotten so brutal that I've been working to make the leap from the consulting room to intergroup conflict and see if I could use what I learned about individuals to make some kind of difference on a large scale. And as I said before, our species can bridge divides between here and Mars. We can bridge divides between here and you, wherever you are in the country. And yet we cannot bridge divides between people who think differently. If I'm left and you're right, or I'm religious and you're not, or you're just obviously stupid, crazy, or evil. And that's just how, and you should be, unfriended, blocked, canceled, ridiculed, shamed, whatever. It doesn't work, but we can't seem to get past it. So the way that I'm using my psychiatric ideas in these projects it's actually fourfold. One is that we're individual people here, and we're going to get to know each other as individual people. On the world stage, there's a cascade effect in large groups. People feel more comfortable in large groups. They band together in large groups. They take up the cause of the leader of the large group, and sort of the nuances of, do you really believe this or not, gets lost. And suddenly it's the Trumpists are this way and the progressives are that way, and nobody talks. I think as individuals, we're going to turn out to be very different people, and that will be helpful. The other is integrating the personal with the ideological, how we got to be who we are, and empathizing with one another's beliefs, even if it's dramatically different, because we get to know them. We get to know each other, how we think, how we got to be who we are, and our thinking styles, our traumas, our histories, how we were raised. That gives us more information than just, you believe that, you must be crazy. The other that is the alternating face-to-face with writing. In my experience, when people are face-to-face, we just tend to be nicer often. You can read each other's expressions, you're more empathic, or you let things go. When on social media, I don't know if you're all on, I guess you are on social media, or we're just brutal to each other. We misunderstand, we don't have face-to-face expression, we don't have an alliance. And so it's so easy to say, God, that's stupid. I'm blocking you and get out of my friend, and so it sort of allows the aggression. It's a kind of honesty in a way, but it's also aggressive and distorted, but it rises to the surface. So I'm hoping that if we can alternate the face-to-face human nature you know, who we are as people with the more disembodied, you know, I believe this, maybe we can push our thinking a little bit further. So, and the other is motivation. I've been trying to do this on Facebook for a long time, but I don't know if you know the psychiatrist's light bulb joke. How many psychiatrists does it take to change a light bulb? The answer is only one, but the light bulb has to really want to change. I can talk to my Facebook friends from now until forever about how they should, you know, stay in the room and talk to each other, but it's like, I don't want to, can't make me. And I can't make me. So I'm delighted that Nat found you guys who are, you know, interested in doing this. And so I'm hopeful that we can push through some of the obstacles the way we don't have to on other social media groups. And so that's basically my story, how I got to do this.
Very noble. Good on you.
Oh, thank you. So yeah, why don't we start with you introducing yourselves and what you'd like us to know about you and how you got to be who you are and what matters to you in the world. Anybody?
I'll start. I'm Sandy Kresh. I'm a long time corporate executive, consultant, entrepreneur who have spent my professional life growing businesses. A lot of them consumer-driven businesses by and large, a lot of them in the media and entertainment space. I've been politically active for my whole life. I think I was born to it. My parents were politically active, and my mother was very, very, very liberal. My father less so. They lived in a place where one needed to be Republican in order to survive in the local government. My father spent some time as he was an architect. He spent some time as the town engineer. I lived with a lot of conflict over many things, but that was one of them. I currently am an advanced leadership fellow at Harvard, doing something completely off the wall at this stage of my life. This is a program that takes people with long business careers and effectively sort of repurposes them to do work that has social impact. I've always had a not-for-profit sort of sideline all my years in the professional space. And I'm working actually on political polarization and the impact of misinformation, because I feel as though this is a critical issue we're all facing at this point. And I think it's an intractable problem that many people are trying to address in many, many different ways. And I've spent my professional career solving problems. That's what I do. This is one that I think is really important for us, for our kids, our grandkids, and whatever. And so I'm working on it. I'm thrilled that you are working on it, Alice, and very curious as to where we go from here.
Yeah, me too. Oh, I guess we lost Jean again.
Well, I hesitate to start without Jean. Should I, or should we wait to try and get her back? Actually, I think I see. Yeah, no, you're right. There's a Shayna in the attendees list, Matt. Matt, you're muted.
Matt, you're muted.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, no, Shane is observing. She's not.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Do you want me to start an introduction?
Yeah, maybe you better start because I don't know. I don't
Yeah.
know. when
We
we're
can
gonna
edit
have
it later, I guess, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, she'll also be able to view this all later. So
She can do, yeah.
Okay. Well, my name's Ian. My father was a father's family was Russian Jewish immigrants, immigrated to Boston the late 1800s, early 1900s, changed their name to sort of deal with the discrimination and stuff at the time. Mother's family were Scotch-Irish immigrants, so Ulster, if you know the history of all that. So both immigrant families, but kind of unusual that a Jewish guy from Boston and then New York married a Scotch-Irish WASP from Ohio, rural Ohio, farmers and stuff. But it was a great experience. I remember growing up in the Jewish Community Center and hearing Yiddish all the time and getting all that culture, and then completely, it was like it was nothing at the time to switch back and forth between that culture and sort of maybe traditional American. Who's the artist that's always called the painter of traditional American? Oh gosh, I can see his paintings right now and I forgot his name, but sort of that sort of Midwest sort of, it seems like it's on the tip of your tongue, Wendy. Do you know the artist I'm talking about? No, anyway. I'm proud of both, I grew up proud of both sides of my family and both cultures. They were really different. I think that helped me sort of be able to learn to get along with people who were different from me. I think the Jews in particular have a really sort of strong background of wherever they land, figuring out how to assimilate and try to be part of that society, even though it doesn't always work out for them. But that was sort of handy. But then on my other side, I had such a strong affinity. I was named after my grandfather, on my mom's side. Everyone, the Scots-Irish, if you know anything about the Scots-Irish, they fought in every war America's probably ever had. There's someone in every generation, well, several people in every generation. So I always wanted to join the military. I did that after college. I was the first person in my family to go to college, and my parents wanted me to do that first, but tons of debt later, it was kind of inevitable that I joined the military at some point. So I ended up retiring from the reserves, but as you know, from the last 20, 30 years, if you're in the military, you're in, you're out, you get recalled, you go back, you get out, you try to live your civilian life. It led though to a good job with the Department of Defense that I've done everything from training and conflict dynamics and team building and leadership stuff to being an intelligence analyst, to being a planner, and now I manage a bunch of reservists and make sure they get the training that they need to be sharp and be ready when they get recalled. I've always been politically active, well, since I guess the 92 election was my first back in college. I always pick losers though. If anyone remembers 92, there was a guy named Paul Tsongas, a Greek from Massachusetts, who had this great idea. It ended up becoming Obamacare, but anyway, yeah, man ahead of his time. But yeah, I've always been sort of irritated at the, even though I'm pretty liberal, I get irritated with I have so many friends on the Scotch-Irish side who are, strong in their beliefs and not crazy. I get irritated with the labeling and the condescension that different sections of society seem to talk to each other with and presume sort of their superiority to. And no wonder we can't, we can do things like, you're right, Wendy, like getting the moon, but when we try to have
It's Alice.
Oh, sorry, Alice. Yeah, I don't know why I said Wendy. When we try to solve problems, we used to be able to do it, but we're starting to regress back to sort of that tribal. I think humans, evolutionarily, we're kind of hardwired for tribalism and authoritarianism. And it took, if you think about the length of time it took for as long as Homo sapiens have been around, to get to a point where the Enlightenment and the rights of the individual and, you know, all that kind of stuff became sort of the foundation of liberal democracies. It's like a nanosecond in the evolution of human development. And I fear that we're already retreating back into sort of that hardwired sort of Neanderthal brain of just tribalism and you know, zero-sum game sort of thinking. So I'm just going on and on because I keep hoping Jean's going to get back, but I she's not. So I can end it there unless I left out something important about my background that you'd like to know. I'm a dad. I have 3 kids. You know, recently divorced, trying to make life work. All the stuff that everyone's probably just life is, you know, trying to deal with life and trying to make the world a better place, leave it better than I found it, the way I think that we were all raised to do, but we can't seem to do as a group anymore.
Yeah. Yeah, same with me. I have 2 sons and you know, hoping the world will be a place where they can survive and thrive. But it's very hard for their generation. And Matt, you're my kid's generation. That's how we met.
Oh yeah.
His brother and my son were friends.
Yes.
You want to just tell us something about yourself? Okay.
Oh, me.
Yeah.
Well, first of all, I sent Jean the phone number. I don't know if we'll be able to get her back or not. I mean, she'll be able to watch this and she can comment in the group, and maybe we could try to fix it for next time.
Yeah, maybe she can.
But I think we're just gonna have to move on.
Hey,
Yeah.
before I let you go, can I say one thing that sort of resonates with what Alice is trying to, could I just,
Yeah.
is that, so maybe Sandy and I sound like we've been trying to also, maybe we sound like not the best candidates for this because we don't come from ideological extremes that are trying to talk to each other. But I've been ceremoniously dumped by long-time friends because I won't take a side in this process. So I think we tend to think that it's the extremes that are always fighting, but I'm like a militant centrist and I will not, you know, let that happen. But I've had friendships die because of that very sort of thing. So
I have exactly the same problem. I will try to position myself the way I do in psychoanalysis, you know, position yourself between 2 forces and try to get them to see each other's perspectives. And everybody jumps on me like, you're so wishy-washy, and or how come you're taking their side, or and it almost seems offensive that I won't say, you know, this side is right and that side is wrong. It's do you have any ideas about why this is happening now? Because I've seen it too, and you know, in my career it was all, you know, nuance, paradox, ambiguity, you know, 5-day-a-week psychoanalysis, struggling to like understand the depths of your soul. And now it's very it's black and white. It's, you know, what fix my problem. It's, you know, a pill or a skill. And you know, we just don't look for you know, the coexistence of opposites.
My sense is, my take is that there are 3 forces that have essentially made it worse. I think it's always been there. There have always been disagreement. But I think the Obama presidency, to a certain degree, was a signal. It was a signal on both sides of the political divide. On one side of the political divide, it was a signal that there are possibilities that were not necessarily seen before. On the other side of the political divide, there was a signal that things are changing in this country in ways that are very threatening to people who want the status quo to remain. So I think it's sort of, it exacerbated the issue around racism, it exacerbated the ways in which people began to think about the demographic changes and whatever. So I think that's one piece of it. A second piece of it is we've never been in as polarized a media environment as we are now. And I think that whatever predisposition there had ever been to have very separate points of view, those are being reinforced and reinforced and reinforced with, in some cases, deliberately false information, in some cases, spins on things. And I was in a conversation yesterday in which we were talking about voting rights and what was going on with laws with regard to voting rights. And someone in the room basically said, well, we can't agree about this because you're basically thinking that Republicans are doing this to reduce turnout of minorities when all we're doing is doing this to address rabid fraud in the system. And what ensued from there was a conversation of, no, there's not rabid fraud in the system, and there was no way of penetrating. So we don't have facts that are comparable across the two. And then I think the other piece of the puzzle is Trump and the fact that for whatever reason, for some person, he became a charismatic leader to the point where it's cult-ish, and you're either part of the cult or you're not part of the cult. And I think he has, what he's doing politically, I think, has given permission for people to be in separate camps, has reinforced the ability to be in separate camps and whatever. So I think it's much tougher to overcome them because there's a sense of either you're for him or you're against him, and there's no way to talk across that divide.
So we should, I think I see Jean back, and I'd love to hear her perspective.
Yeah.
When
Jean, can you hear us now?
Uh-oh.
Yeah, actually, I don't think she has audio enabled.
Well, while she's trying, I was going to say, I'd offer that Sandy's view is a very well stated, but I will offer that being a liberal myself, I think it's a uniquely very liberal sort of view of what the problems are. And when I talk to my conservative and even sort of
no doubt
moderate friends, they would take issue with some of what you're saying, and I can see their point. So when Jean introduces herself, I'll offer the alternative view there that I have some sympathy with, if not agreement with.
Try.
You gonna try and chatter?
Yeah. Oh, I'm
while
not
you're
able to.
doing that, I can start if that's okay.
Yeah, go ahead.
Go ahead,
Because I'm
just
not
keep
able
going.
to. Yeah, I'm not able to
Keep
get.
going.
through
I
it
think,
all.
yeah, she can watch it later and then you just write.
Well,
Yeah.
so the liberal perspective, and especially sometimes a very progressive sort of perspective of what Sandy's three factors were, was that Trump is a sort of a racist reaction. This is a bumper sticker. I don't want to put words in your mouth, Sandy, but Trump was sort of a racist reaction to the Obama presidency. But I personally know several relatives and other people, and the statistics bear it out, that a lot of people that voted for Obama voted for Trump. And
absolutely.
And the reason that was not so much because they felt like the demographics of the country were changing. They were scared about America becoming a less white majority, whatever the typical sort of liberal progressive explanation of why these people voted for Trump is. But it's because preceding Obama for a long time, and a lot of people sort of point to the Clintons as an example, which is why I think Hillary was such a flawed candidate. But the Democratic Party, and both parties really in reality, both parties, because Trumpism was not traditional conservatism. It took over from a very populist sort of uprising. It could have happened in either party is sort of my point. But the traditional parties left their roots. And so, for instance, the new Democrats under the Clintons sort of became sort of Wall Street Democrats. The working class union people that are all my Scots-Irish family for generations felt very, very betrayed by the way the Democrats under Clinton's leadership, did things like NAFTA, sent their jobs away, didn't provide any social good job training or pathways into different careers, which is what, by the way, Joe Manchin is really arguing for, and so many people are beating him up on that too. But these working class people felt betrayed, and they initially thought Obama, he's not a Clinton. He's an outsider. He's gonna, fix all this. But the Democratic Party had sort of already become, it had transformed. It was no longer like Biden's Democratic Party, even though he's the head of it now. It's not really a true champion of unions and working class and raising all boats up kind of party, or at least that, for better or worse, that's the perception. And then on the Republican Party, which was supposed to be this party of individual liberty and free trade and economic opportunity, true, a sort of a country club aspect to some of the, especially when you think about the Bushes in the involvement, betrayed its kind of roots too. And so you have these two parties that were dominated by two big names, Bushes and Clintons, over the last several election cycles that seemed to betray a large swath of the American people, such that many got disenfranchised or didn't trust the system. That skepticism, that cynicism is the word I'm looking for, that huge cynicism. I get it that we're the most polarized, but we've also never been so cynical about the institutions that our society is based on and needs to have function well. I'd only add to that, and I'll end it here while Gene seems to be back on, that the other reason, Alice, that I think we've gotten so bad at this is that when I grew up, and probably when Sandy grew up and when you grew up, I don't know about Matt, it'd be interesting to hear, civics really was a hardcore educational component that taught that despite all of our disagreements, and okay, sure, I'm sure that that history whitewashed some certain parts of unpleasantries of the American system, although I'm sure we all learned about slavery and Jim Crow. I did. But my point is that the idea of America was primary. The idea that there's common values and common good that we can seek, and that despite our disagreements of how to get to a destination, we're all heading towards the same destination, or at least trying to move the ball forward. And what identity politics has done, and other forms of division has done, is that it's taken that idea of a common set of values and instead had us believe, or many segments of society believe, that no, this group's values are completely anathema to this group's values.
Absolutely.
And they are literally exclusionary, and one has to win and the other has to lose. And that was never what, and I'm scared to say this, but that is kind of what is actually being taught now.
That's right.
And maybe not in high schools, but certainly when you get to above that. But even we pit groups as oppressors and victims, and that breeds resentment and a sense that there's no common values. And so that's the big danger, is that, have there been oppressors? Yes. Have there been victims in American society? Yes. But I mean, if everyone thinks hard about it, the industrial age and the waves of immigrants that came through over the decades and centuries, have all struggled through that. What's different now is that we don't have a sense of common identity. And I'll stop there.
I completely agree with that.
Oh.
And I also agree with the fact that the primary driver of Trump was not racism. It was a set of other issues. I think that what happened in the Obama presidency was it kind of exacerbated a whole lot of things that have been floating around out there. And certainly many of the people I know who voted for Trump purely on economic issues.
Mhm.
What's intriguing to me now is the extent to which, and what I can't get under the hood of, is the intensity of loyalty when a lot of the policies have not been consistent with the interests of the people who look to him as a solution to problems.
Well, that's our hardwired human nature, though. See, Obama didn't try to get people to be viewing himself as, I am the answer, only I can fix it, that kind of thing. But Trump did that. And unfortunately, that's what appeals when a period of identity politics or tribalism, when that kind of thinking appeals, then the great leaders, that I'm putting that in parentheses, that's when the appeal to our base natures takes over and people like Trump can become supreme. Or ideologies. Sorry, go ahead, Alice.
One thing that I'm using my psychiatrist model. I know nothing about political conflict resolution theory and things like that. That's all been very, very new arena for me. But I think of Trump the way I think of a symptom in an individual, that he rose up for a reason. His presence means something, even if it's crazy. A crazy symptom in an individual has a lot of meaning. My field has transitioned to this, like I said, pills and skills. You don't like a symptom, give it a pill and make it go away. The analyst in me says, no, it's there for a reason. We need this way of thinking, even if it's cockeyed, and I want to understand it. And I want to honor the people who believe in him. And I know a whole bunch of them, and some of them are really, really good people, smart people. And from what I've learned from talking to people across the divides, is there's something about the liberal, there's a hypocrisy in the liberal perspective that they sense and they react to very powerfully. This feeling of, we are so empathic to everyone who, if you're, Black or gay or trans or poor or whatever, we will take care of you. But if you like Trump, you're a low-life, stupid, crazy idiot. Get out of here. And that to them is hypocritical. It's a different color psychological skin, which it sort of is. I can put people into different psychological categories if you ask me to. But it's them. They own it. They own it the way their Black friends own their Black skin, or their gay friends own their, and so dismissing them while at the same time telling them they should embrace all these other disenfranchised people feels disenfranchising. And so they, I think they react to that and say, no, you will not control me. You will not tell me how I'm supposed to think. And so even if their thinking is cockeyed, they're going to say, I am what I am, and get over it. If I don't want to wear a mask, if I don't want to get a vaccine, if I don't, want to play by your rules and teach what you want me to teach, tough.
Yeah, although I would caution, and I hope we are always aware of this too, Alice, is that, and I'm sure you didn't mean to do this, but there's a tendency to lump for us, especially, if you're on one particular side enough, to lump everyone who does something kind of that you think is kooky into one camp. But I know lots of anti-vaxxers that are very liberal, and I know lots of
That's true too.
like
That's true too.
granola. So it's one of those things where, but it's another thing that's so frustrating. It's that tendency to associate all those things that you think are dumb and stupid and irrational with one set of the society, and not realize that these things kind of cross strata.
Yeah.
And
That's very true.
yeah.
Um,
I think Jean's mic is off. Should we let her try, or Matt, maybe we should hear from, we cut you off, Matt. We should try to hear from what you.
Yeah, well, Jean's audio is not enabled at all, so I don't think there's anything I can
Okay.
do.
She's trying to, yeah.
But
I'll open the chat window so I can see. If
for
she's-
me, yeah, my general feeling is that there is a silent majority in this country that is drowned out by the loudest voices on the internet, because that's just how that technology works. And I'm fairly centrist also, so
Yeah.
And
Yeah,
how, if you don't mind me asking, Matt, how old are you?
I am 31.
31. Okay.
When I was growing up, I think I did have a reasonably good civics education.
Okay.
So that was in the early 2000s. I mean, I learned constitutional law in I think I was introduced to that in the 8th grade. We would do exercises where we would do exercises where you evaluate Supreme Court decisions and mock Supreme Court and that sort of stuff.
Okay.
So I had a reasonably good good civics education, I think, at that point anyway.
Well, I don't know when it happened, but my oldest is my son. He's 23. My youngest is, my third one is a daughter. She's a senior in high school now. And they have a civics class, but they don't learn that they don't do that kind of stuff anymore. It's much more of a sort of damning critique of what's wrong with the American system, not like how is this system, how is it supposed to function, and then compare how it's supposed to what we see, and what reform movements and all that kind of stuff, or whatever, or that would be more sociology classes. But even in civics, like what's the basic underpinnings of the system we have and stuff. Just they didn't get any of that, so I was kind of shocked. And
well, I actually sorry, I never had a civics class. In middle school I had social studies, and then in high school I just had history. But I do think that people younger than me have had less than what I had. So I do think
trust me, they have. And in high school there is no, and so when Sandy and I, and probably Alice too, were in high school civics was a mandatory class that you got on it was basically how to be a good citizen in a democracy. And that is not a class anymore. So
yeah, no, that was not a class.
No,
for me
not at all. I went to Catholic schools through the 12th grade.
Mm-hmm.
So I was taught by nuns who, but basically, I felt safe. I had Jesus over here and Uncle Sam over there, and they were good guys, and they were going to take care of me. My parents were going to take care of me, and the government worked like this, but it was something I, passed the test. It didn't really mean anything to me until college, when Vietnam happened and feminism happened and abortion happened, and that's when I stuck my head in a science book and went to medical school, so I
I
wouldn't have
can,
to deal
I
with
can
that.
understand that reaction, yeah.
Yeah, I woke up
I
in an
think-
alternate reality.
I think the issue, I think civics education doesn't really exist now in the way that we had it. But I think beyond that, I think the system doesn't do a very good job of teaching critical thinking, which to me is as important as knowing the nuts and bolts of how the government works. I think I am stunned by kids I know who come out of very good schools who know a lot of facts, but have a very difficult time assimilating information and coming to a point of view about what that information tells them. So I think that's a problem as well in the education.
Jean, I see that your mute sign is back, so your audio is enabled. If you are able to
We'd
talk,
all love to hear from you.
feel free. Just know anytime you can talk, just go ahead. But other than that, go on, Ian.
No,
Or whoever was gonna
see if Jean can. I think she's on. Go ahead, Jean.
Yeah, no, her audio is not
Oh, darn it. Okay.
there
Yeah,
anymore.
yeah.
Well, I was gonna just add to what Sandy said and add to it and just say that the other part that's missing, and I don't know if I really got much of that. It's been a while now, so I don't remember if I got this in high school in civics. No, I did, but it wasn't in civics. It was in either history or somewhere. And what they and this is the other difference is that we were taught that what we are a part of, the whole sort of Western civilization thing, is based on the ideas, not the race of or the country of or the whatever, but the ideas of the Enlightenment, that the individual is sovereign. These are, John Locke. I'll just use John Locke as sort of, but you start with sort of Hobbes, and you get that Leviathan sort of, what is human nature? What are we in a state of nature? John Locke, social contract, individual rights, all that kind of stuff that are the underpinnings, the Enlightenment underpinnings of a free society. And what I can tell, because I have so many friends in the academy who I totally understand why, getting back to Alice's point, that there's this, it's not just, Alice, what was the word you used? It's not just
Disenfranchising.
but it's also sort of an ivory tower sort of elite arrogance that those things that underpin our society, even though we don't have a perfect society, the Enlightenment is racist, the capitalism is unjust. These things that were sort of not taught as not an ideology, because it's not as though we were fed an ideological worldview, but just that here's the philosophical foundations of our society. Those are now sort of like trash. And so it's very hard to I'm not surprised, it's not surprising to me that the combination of lack of a sort of a civics thing, how to be a good citizen and be a responsible, free person, and the trashing of the philosophical principles under which we make a social contract would call into question and cynicism all of those things that sort of you need to sort of have a society be cohesive. So when the things that are supposed to be cohesive are issues of great disagreement and even a sense of oppression, that it's actually hurt me, then you can't be a unified group of people. So it wasn't just that the rise of tribalism and identity politics happened. It's that it came in because these other things got their stature got lessened. And what I think of it historically comparative to is sort of that Weimar Republic, that interwar period in Germany, when, and it's why I'm such a militant centrist, when, you know, Germany had a functioning democratic, culturally vibrant society, but the extremes, I mean, Nazis and communists were fighting it out. And because they took over, and because the center did not fight for the center and didn't hold to the neoliberal, the liberal principles that glued society together, those extremes pulled that society apart. And it could have been, you know, it could have been the communists that won, and instead of the fascists, but it happened to be the fascists. But that's what I fear we're in. We're in a period where the center, and this is why I don't criticize people like, even though I criticize them, but why I don't think that guys like Biden and people that believe in sort of pragmatic political compromise, you know, I will always defend that, even if we're seen like we're holding things back or we won't take sides, because if you don't have those people, all you're left with are these people, and all they want to do is destroy and gain power. So,
but question: when you say centrist, can you define what you mean?
Okay.
Because
Yeah,
that
because
comes
I'm not
across
really,
as
I'm kind of a liberal, but I guess I just mean sort of pragmatic centrism. So more like you have your ideal, what you'd like to have happen, but you recognize right away that you are not, or your view is not universal, and you're not going to throw the system into disorder and chaos and cause divisiveness in order to get your way. You're willing to move to the center. So I'm not really saying that I'm a centrist in the sense that I believe that all correct solutions are actually not liberal or conservative. I defend the center as a principle of, you can't reasonably expect in a free society that you can force your will or your solution as you think it should be on everybody else. We're a representative. Yeah.
But does that mean, say, okay, we'll do a $1 trillion instead of a $3.5 trillion bill because it's a compromise?
So yeah, no, I wouldn't, because the Democrats are so bad at messaging that they fell into this trap of how much spending is it, as opposed, and there's a point to that, because a lot of Democrats are used to be fiscally conservative, so I get that. But really, what it's more about is not. But I take your point, Alice. It's more about. So, for instance, a lot of the policies that are in, if you want to use that specific example of this Build Back Better bill, a lot of those policies are not opposed by Manchin. Now, Sinema is a little different because she has some special interests she's looking out for. What it seems like centrists, because he's not the only one, right? There's a bunch in the House as well, are opposed to, are sort of like dramatically expanding through potentially inflationary spending a permanent beyond almost like New Deal style sort of like government expansion. And so they're fiscally conservative. So they want policies that support the working people, but they don't want to make it a welfare state. So does that help explain? It's like centrist in the sense that, yes, we want to make progress, but let's not throw everything at a problem and say government can solve anything. Let's come up with pragmatic policies that make sense. Paid family leave, everybody supports that. You know, let's do that one.
Go ahead, sorry.
Go ahead, Sandy.
No, go ahead, finish.
Well, I was just thinking that people are willing to make compromises is used to be sort of the norm, as opposed to, we're starting from this position and we're not going to bend, and if we do, it's bad. It's a dirty word. The same thing on the right, you know, where they, you know, it has to be ridiculous tax cuts for the rich and corporations, or no tax cuts at all. That kind of thinking. Go ahead, Sandy.
I think it's interesting. I want to roll back to some stuff earlier, but with regard to this process on the reconciliation bill, it feels to me as though we should get to compromise, and Manchin, in some of his stances at this point in time, is the obstacle to getting compromise rather than helping the process. But let's put that aside, because I want to go back to some other stuff, because I believe fervently that there's a group of people in this country that is very disenfranchised. And a lot of what we see going on the right is a reflection of that disenfranchisement. My sense is that part of the disenfranchisement is not economic, caused by the kind of things that have to do with jobs and trainings and whatever, but is rather cultural and identity focused, and essentially relates to a discomfort with the loss of a traditional world that they're comfortable in, and people from various other segments pushing them to a place where what's going on around them feels like they're not living in their world anymore. And that's a big issue, because when you dive in and look at a lot of the data, it's people who have traditionalist values much more than people who have themselves been disenfranchised who are actually having this problem. And then when we go in the direction of John Locke and the Enlightenment and the role of the individual in society and attitudes toward capitalism, it is a fact of life that while the Enlightenment focused on the individual as an agent for their own life, in point of fact, it was that life to be lived in the context of a society. So the reason that there was all this discussion of the issues that John Locke discussed was there was a fundamental change going on in the structure of society in Europe. And there needed to be a way of dealing with something that was not a monarchy and not feudalism and not all those things. So that it was, how is one an individual in what is a democratically crafted society? And the whole notion of capitalism, which I don't necessarily think liberals reject, certainly none of the liberals I know reject the notion of capitalism, but I think Adam Smith, in the father of capitalism, so to speak, in constructing capitalism, raised a series of issues about capitalism with a moral core.
Right.
And my sense is that we're drifting away from capitalism with a moral core,
Right,
to capitalism focused on power and money in the absence of a moral core. So I think what somehow gets lost in all of these discussions of the extremes is that on each extreme, what has been lost is what you were talking about before, Ian, which was the notion that there's a common good, that we need to operate in a way that provides equal opportunity for everyone and is really focused on the common good. And the issue is, what's the definition in terms of how you implement that? I think what's kind of happened is we've locked into one side of the fence, basically thinking about the common good undermines my rights as an individual, and and the other side has locked into thinking about the common good has to involve a set of things about facilitating the common good through government. And therefore, the common good is something we should make go away, because that's a place where we have significant problems. And to me, the thing that makes me crazy about the anti-vaxxers in the COVID world is, if you don't want to have a vaccination and you want to put yourself at risk, I get that. But if you don't have a vaccination, it puts me at risk. And you don't have a right to make a series of decisions that, in your view, impacts your well-being when it impacts my well-being as well. And I think that's the place. I have rights too. And I struggle with people who say, I'm all for individual rights, except if it has to do with being pro-choice about abortion. And so this notion of individual rights versus the common good at least ought to be consistent, it seems to me.
We have no moral compass anymore.
Right.
We've lost our center. It seems to me, when I was growing up, I felt like there was a moral center, whether it was, from America, or from my religion or from my family. There was a right and wrong, and I had an idea what it was. And now it's all, what's your opinion? And facts and opinions are so blurred that, people get their facts from different news sources, and they have different levels of education about the thing, and they spin it however they want. And you can't argue with it because you have to respect that person's belief, whether it's a religious belief or a scientific belief or a political belief. And we don't know what to do. I don't know what to do. When I talk to people, I want to empathize with where they're coming from, but at the same time, I want to say, no, I don't think that works.
Yeah, well, you're right. I mean, I would only caveat one thing about the moral center piece. And by the way, Adam Smith, father of capitalism, true. But of course, there was no economics really before he came. Adam Smith was a moral philosopher, is my point. He did emphatically explain that capitalism only works if people basically treat each other well. It's self-interest with a moral center. It's right. You don't rip off your customer, or you don't exploit the worker. You exchange at a fair, in good faith kind of thing. But getting back to what you said, Alice, there's a moral center for tribes, and tribalism and identity politics, but it's different from the moral center that you think of a democratic society. So the moral center for tribalistic identity sort of thinking is whatever's good for my group is right and everyone else is wrong. So it is a moral center, but it's completely incompatible with a common good, because it's only what's good for us, not them. And that, I guess that is a little intuitive, so I probably didn't need to explain it, but I know what you were getting at. Where do you want to guide this discussion? Because I think we've had a really good exchange so far, but is there something that you were hoping we touch on, an aspect that we need to be sure?
I don't know, I was playing it by ear, but I'm wondering, is there something controversial that we can, because it seems like we're all kind of,
pick a topic.
I mean, when people are face to face, they tend to, empathize with each other.
I'll pick one. I mean, actually, Sandy brought it up, but I am in this sort of limbo on this topic, where I am on the abortion issue. I am personally pro-life, but I support pro-choice as the law of the land because it's. Remember what the Democratic Party policy used to be on abortion, Sandy and Alice? It used to be abortion should be safe, it should be legal, and it should be rare, because we all recognize that it is kind of not the best outcome of a potential human life to just terminate it. But we understand it's going to happen, so let's not try and outlaw it and pretend that we're morally superior than these women who have to make these decisions. But now, you know, and this is sort of, again, sort of how we've gotten so extreme. That was not just the Democratic Party position. That was pretty much the prevalent societal position. And now we've seen extreme pro-lifers that are willing to go to the lengths of, you know, trying to murder doctors. And then when that became sort of unpopular, it's just like, let's just get the most restrictive, basically making it impossible to get an abortion. But then on the liberal side or the progressive side, it's like, basically it's abortion on demand, no questions. It's creeping towards, I know this is more of a conservative argument, so it's not quite there, but it's kind of creeping towards, you know, none of your business, another form of birth control, leave me out, you know, leave it out of the space. So that's kind of a controversial position. But any of these positions have that we could talk about, and maybe we should talk about a different one, but what used to be a controversial position, it's not like abortion was ever not controversial, right? But what used to be sort of a compromise or centrist sort of center has now become two things that I could not live with either one of. Like, I could not, it makes no sense. They're both extremes. They're both unfair and incompatible with human dignity and all that kind of stuff. And it just seems to be, you know, a disaster that we can't overcome because those of us maybe who feel like there's a compromise there, we don't speak up enough, or we don't hold the political power, or we've let it get out of our hands or something. I don't know what you guys think.
I think you absolutely nailed it on the issue of political power. Because I agree with what you described as the Democratic position. My personal position on this is there should never be an abortion, but if people want them, they should be safe and legal and rare. That's the bottom line of the whole thing, that it's not the state who should be making this decision, it's the individual who should be making this decision. And I believe the data suggests that a large majority of the American public shares this view. I think what has happened is that this is a wedge issue that's politically expedient. It has been used to actually energize both sides of the spectrum for political purposes. And that's the reason at this moment in time it's so controversial, and it's going to get more controversial because of the current composition of the Supreme Court. You know, I would differ from you on what is the right.
Your dog differs with you as well.
My husband's walking in the door. I would differ with you with regard to the description of the liberal point of view on this, in the sense that my take is the liberal point of view on this is a woman and her doctor should be in a position of making a decision that's right for her, and that there are, I don't personally support partial birth abortion, but for a situation where there's a medical issue, why that should be the case. But I think no one should be forced to bear a child that they don't want to bear, because the bottom line of the whole thing, from my perspective, is right to life people are very, very anti-abortion, but they're not so supportive of putting in place the infrastructure that's required to help people
Right.
raise children.
Well, that depends on who you, I mean, there's a group that actually is very supportive of that, but they don't have the political power. Yeah.
I can tell you, my trajectory through the abortion theme has been very powerful, visceral. You know, I was raised Catholic, where it was just a non-issue. It was murder. It was killing. It was murder. It was like taking any other life, and you just didn't do it. Didn't matter if you had Down syndrome or raped or whatever. It was a life. You did not take a life. Then I found myself in psychiatry, where the beliefs of other people and the feelings were very different. I saw mentally ill people who had they just couldn't take care of their babies, and you know, and they were on medications, and they were on heroin, and they were, you know, and or other people who just did not get the idea that this piece of fetal tissue that was that big was a baby. You know, maybe it would be, you know, 8 months from now, but it ain't now. So I don't want it. So no brainer. And you couldn't argue morality with that kind of, you know, but it's not a baby. It had a heartbeat yesterday, you know? And so the struggle has been very real. I've actually come to my own conclusion about the dynamics of this, that I've come to think that you can't say it's not a life. It is a life. Right. If it doesn't look like a baby now, it will next month. You look on the ultrasound, you'll see, you know, a little bean-shaped baby. But I think our species is one that kills its own kind. That's my theory. We kill our own kind at the drop of a hat. Other species, they sort of do it, you know, a lion will eat their cubs, or, you know, but we kill very, very quickly. And war is the masculine way to do it, and abortion is the feminine way to do it. And we got to do something about that. Because that's what I'm working toward, is some kind of we got to find a way to slow down. The subtitle of my book is A Recipe to Slow Down or Abort Humankind's Leap to War. And we got to do that. We got to figure out a way to put those feelings into words and fight wars in words, and, you know, rescue babies by understanding what's going on and, you know, not allowing it to happen as much. I don't think we'll ever be able to get rid of it altogether. But
well,
I'll offer, though, that I'm a lifelong soldier, and I know a lot of female soldiers, and they can definitely kill. They
didn't start until, you know, I was too old to join.
Yeah. And the other thing I just point out, and again, it for everyone, it's sort of a personal thing, but you know, I'm sure we've all known couples probably who have wanted to have their own children and have tried, and when there's a miscarriage, they don't talk about that as the loss of a fetus or anything. I mean, that was their baby.
Talking about his
so
baby.
It really is the attitude of the person having the child that is important, and that's why I'm pro-life, but I would only want to try to persuade someone. And by the way, the other reason it's personal is because, so growing up in the church that was very active in the foster care system, because there were so many kids in the foster care. All my kids are adopted, and not because we couldn't have our own, but because there's such a crisis of foster kids. And all of my kids would have been aborted, right? If the prevailing, so one of my just terrible circumstances, like you can think of these are the exact circumstances where you would think, okay, definitely that's a case for abortion. And yet, my kids are all beautiful, amazing human beings. And what I would, the idea that they would not exist, despite the trauma that they came through, is something that, is hard for me to get my head around. But we should probably pick a different topic, but this was a good exchange, see, of where you can see where the controversial topic didn't used to be that controversial, right? Until extremes got a hold of it and turned it into, and Sandy, I have actually been in Democratic Party circles where that idea that it's just safe, legal, and rare, that is trash now. It is literally, I mean, there are posters, abortion on demand, no questions asked, abortion is a form of, I mean, these are progressives holding these kind of attitudes. And so I'm like, oh gosh, where have we gone? But yeah.
Yeah.
I've been involved in the adoption space for years,
Mhm.
and in fact was involved in founding an organization that does adoption advocacy and research in the space and whatever. And one thing that is a fact is that when abortion restrictions are loosened, the number of abortions actually goes down. So it's not as though if you restrict abortions, that you're going to stop abortions. They're going to go underground. They're going to become illegal. It's going to become more dangerous, and whatever. And I think, sort of apropos of what you're saying about abortion on demand being a sign, is, I think, less a statement of policy than a way of interacting with the people who are troubled and who need to make decisions about abortions. And that is, and certainly I know, because I've done adoption counseling for many, many years in the course of my involvement with adoption agencies in the field and whatever. People are really uncomfortable when they're in the position of needing to have an abortion if they think that that needs to be an option. Anything that can be done to make it easier for someone to go through the decision process is helpful to those people. Many of them come out of it basically saying, I'm going to bear the child and put the child up for abortion, or I'm going to keep the child, or whatever. But basically signaling that one is in a safe space where this is something that can be considered, only helps in those kinds of situations, not necessarily in the ending up with an abortion, but ending up with someone who can make a considered decision.
Pick another topic, Alice. We're making progress.
Actually, one that comes to mind is the military. It's one of the things that was not on my radar until I met some of my friends on Facebook who had been in Afghanistan and Iraq and World War II, and the way they feel about joining the military, the bond of the military, shooting a gun, that
not everyone shoots a gun in the military, but
well, but somehow there's something that I missed in my whole training. A New York psychiatrist is not a whole lot of people who shot guns. They don't come to my life. So it really did kind of open my eyes to a dynamic that it might be interesting to
Well, what aspect are you talking about the military as a controversial topic in the sense of we're such a militarized society, or what is it that you're?
I'm not sure. I guess several things. One is the actual bond of the people who join the military and who are in the military, and the mindset that you're,
I'll
taught
offer this.
the wars themselves, and how how we make a decision to go in or not. And
Well, even regardless of that, I will say this is that, so I'm a child of busing. I was bused. Busing was this early integration experiment to integrate neighborhoods and schools and everything. I know because it was implemented locally, there were different, outcomes everywhere. In Denver, it went pretty well. There was some resistance, but it was good for me. But nothing integrates society as well as joining the military. I think, military service, for one thing, when Truman integrated the military, just think about when that happened. Historically, that was way before the civil rights movement achieved its, integration on another. But that, I think it's not given enough credit for laying the foundation for that, because while there certainly were racists in the military, I'm not saying there weren't. I've run into them. There's people that really hate Jews in the military. But over in the bigger picture, the military was a means of not just getting different groups in society to see each other and understand each other, but to actually work together and problem solve together. And it's very hard to be racist against someone or bigoted against someone. And I don't just mean white people on black people. I mean, my battle buddy was a black kid from the Bronx who, when we first had to be battle buddies and stuff, I mean, he really did not think that a white guy, especially with Jewish background, was going to be his friend. I mean, we had to really, but that's what the military does. And then, and that's before you even get into an actual war.
It's interesting you say that, because my friends who have been in the military are also adamantly, anti this critical race theory, and they will say, if you're a good guy, you're my friend. I don't care what color you are. If you're not, don't force me to be nice to you because you're a different color. And they say that the military, I think, had a lot to do with that.
The meritocracy.
It's the person that you are that matters. And other people will say, oh, you must be racist because you're not focusing on race. And they will say, no, I'm focusing on the person that you are. I see both sides. I can certainly argue systemic racism as a thing, but I can also argue the importance of individual connections with.
Look, no one, even the people that I know have been in the military. I was enlisted too, so there were just in the Army. If you're enlisted, well, first of all, Army and enlisted, you're gonna have a lot. You're gonna meet Puerto Ricans. Just everyone is gonna be part of the mix, right? So no one in the military who's gotten to know people from different backgrounds would dismiss racism or say that there wasn't, like redlining. No, people understand when you get to know someone's background and why it is, you're not going to dismiss that. What you're saying though, what it tends to engender though, is the idea that exactly kind of what you said is that, affirmative action, yes, because there's disparities that we need to try and overcome. Critical race theory, no, because it is not who, it is not your identity, it is who you are as a person. And this idea that, well, you described it best, so I guess that's the distinction I'd make. It's not as though people who have been in the military or have gotten to know people that they never would have otherwise interacted with much or gotten to know on a real personal level dismiss these other the realities of our society. It's that they've seen that isn't the way it has to be, and that we can get over that without being forced to you, like you were saying earlier, like you have to think that this is the way, it is, because that sort of, ivory tower, we're smarter than you, we're telling you that critical race theory is the answer and you have to agree to it or you're a racist. That is what is resentful, not just to people with my skin tone, but to African Americans, Puerto Ricans, everybody who's sort of been through that gauntlet.
And Matt, by the way, do we have anybody, any Black people or other cultures or races, religions in this?
Sorry?
Do we have anybody in this project that's from other cultures or races?
Well, I don't know the races of.
You'll find out in the next group.
Find out next group.
Yes.
In the project, except I know that there's one person who said he was an immigrant from Singapore.
Okay, cool.
Am I the only military, do you know, Matt, or you don't know that either, based on people's backgrounds?
You may or may not be.
Okay.
There might be somebody else who said they were in the military, but
the only reason I
but you
bring
may
it up
be
is
the only
because, kind of like I was getting at earlier, Alice, is that when I said that I'm a child of busing and everything and grew up with that, I definitely had friends because of that experience and integration in high school that were of different races, but they weren't lifelong friends. You got along with each other because that was like a mini experiment or a short-term experiment. When you spend a long time in the military, I've got lifelong friends. I've been to Puerto Rico to visit his family. I've been back to the Bronx to visit his family. I've been, these are friends that are probably tighter than any friends I've had in my life. And I definitely would not have known them this intimately and well. We wouldn't share this view of the world. And it's not a militaristic worldview. It's just a view born out of, getting through those barriers and seeing each other for who we really are.
It's interesting that I completely agree about this shared experience in the military. And my view would be that everybody should have an experience which puts them with different kinds of people in a situation where they need to work together, because I think that's the best way of actually making people bridge the divide, be able to learn about other people. And I think the military is great. I would be delighted if we didn't have to have a military, because I don't like the idea of us being in wars. But I think everybody should have an experience that either is the military or matches what the military does in terms of building reliance on people who are different kinds of people.
I know what that is.
And I say that coming from a perspective where I think we spend far too much money on the military. A lot of that money could be used for other things. If nobody was allowed ever to have another gun, I would be thrilled with that idea. But it's really—
my Scotch-Irish relatives would never allow that to happen. So
yes, I understand that. But it's interesting. I'm in this program at Harvard, and there is a program at Harvard that takes very high potential people out of the military and takes them through a Master of Public Policy program at the Kennedy School in order to position them for more senior ranking jobs in the military. And I sort of came into this really in many ways very anti-military, and not with a very positive view of the military in general. And I've had a lot of opportunity over the last little while to interact in one-on-one with a number of these Master of Public Policy candidates out of the military. And in point of fact, I spent a fair amount of time mentoring some of them as they think about where they're going to go in the military or how they're going to transition out. And I've come out of this, with, first of all, with a very different view of the military that I went into it with. But second of all, with a sense that if we're looking for a moral center, and if we're looking for people who get the common good, the degree of those traits in these people who have come through the military is beyond any collective group of people that I have ever been in contact with. And first of all, that was a relevant revelation to me. But second of all, it speaks to something either about who they were going in or what the military does to everyone, because the degree of sensitivity, I would never have thought a Navy fighter pilot would be a sensitive, compassionate person. And I found them, and they, at least the ones I've encountered over the last 6 months or a year, actually are that, have a sense of honor, a sense of commitment that I've not seen in any other grouping quite that way.
Well, Alice, we've touched on something then in this that might be a solution to what the dilemma that we're talking about, especially when we go back to the lack of civics education. And that is sort of this idea of national service. And, you know, there's a reason why, as Sandy pointed out, that military people think this way. And, you know, it's why they're so sought after for employment after they get out. But another group that is sought after this way, but has such a smaller budget and much a smaller, you probably don't even know about them. But Bush one started it, but he had a really cheesy name called 1,000 Points of Light. Clinton took it and turned it into something called Americorps. I don't know if you're familiar with that term. Obama expanded it. I really think that what would help resolve the trouble that we have in this political and social, cultural malaise or confrontation, corruption, is a national service kind of idea. And what's great about the military is that it gets people when they're young, right? It puts them through this process. Those biases that they had maybe coming into it, because Sandy, it's not who, I mean, it's maybe a small part of the kind of person they were before, but the military really does, to make you into a soldier or a sailor or airman, they have to break down things that are sort of self-centered and ethnocentric and all those other things and build you back up as a team person. Americorps does the same kind of a thing. So if you haven't heard about it or read about it, it's basically just it's a domestic Peace Corps kind of national service program. And just like the military, they give the equivalent of some college education money or post-high school, post-secondary school education money for serving. But also like the military, if you go into it, you know, they don't, if you're a screw up, if you're not going to get on board with the idea that you're part of a team, you have to work together with people of different, you know, backgrounds, and you don't question, you know, the goal, you achieve the goal and stuff like that, then you're tossed out. Also for things like bad behavior too, like, fighting, drugs, all that kind of stuff. But basically it's kind of like that thing that Sandy is saying she wished that we had. It just doesn't have the funding or the resources that it would have to have a huge impact. But wherever my son was in it, and wherever they, you know, it forged the kinds of relationships that the military did for me. And that was after just a year of service.
Interesting.
And can we sort of slid over something very gently in this conversation about the military that I'm really curious about, if we have time for it. And that is the question of critical race theory. continue to struggle with why there is so much resistance to the idea of this being taught.
Cool.
And I don't understand it. So I would welcome any thoughts.
That's a can of worms that we probably don't
That might be something that we can
do
do
next time. Yeah.
in writing.
Or in writing. Yeah.
I think that's
Yeah,
where something that
Technically, my intention was to cap this at 4 o'clock. I didn't actually think we would go the full 2 hours, but that was but it's up to you guys.
Well, I still would say that it might be something that Sandy, especially rather than having me give my interpretation of it, might be worthwhile on that topic to do a little quick reading on it and then comparing what we understand next time. But I will say that the reason it's probably controversial that it's not your father's Oldsmobile. It's not the old sort of like, we recognize there are racial inequities born out of our history that need to be alleviated through public policy. It's not that simple. It's much more of a kind of what Alice was getting about on the sort of the hypocrisy of the people pushing this, because critical race theory didn't pop. It's based on critical theory, and critical theory comes out of sort of a Marxist sort of view of things. It's very much about, you must think a certain way about the world and not just recognize there are things we need to solve together. It's a very much more sort of directive and us and them kind of thing. So that would be my short bumper sticker version of why it's so controversial. But
I think maybe we could
save that one.
save that for the writing part, maybe.
Okay.
Okay.
But,
Okay. Because I legitimately
next week,
don't understand it.
I think
We got
next
15 minutes then,
week
Matt.
come in and add to this and talk with us, and then we can talk together and see. I think a little bit of conflict is likely to happen, and then maybe we can, empathize with each other. It's a model I use all the time is that we have two eyes and two hands and 2 feet for a reason, and two eyes that focus on a shared horizon. Even if they see the landscape differently, you get clarity, you get perspective, you get depth perception. But if the left eye and the right eye are blind, you trip all over yourself.
Yeah.
And I think with something like critical race theory, I can see both sides pretty clearly. I could argue, if I had to write a paper on one side or the other, I could probably argue both fairly effectively. But there's got to be a way to put it together that,
yeah.
some shared horizon where you honor both sides' point of view and teach that rather than my way or the highway.
Yeah.
I don't know.
How about then for the last 15 minutes, why don't we come up with a topic that's not sort of a culture war topic, and more of another controversial topic that's sort of outside of the culture wars that might be worth discussing for the last 15 that Matt was planning. But I'm open to suggestions, Matt or Alice, on what that topic, or Sandy, what that topic should be. And this is something that gets to that sort of left-right debate over sort of like entitlement versus support, right? And there's a strong argument, whether or not it's valid on both sides, but the sort of, it's gotten more extreme sort of on just as these other topics have as well, such that people on the extreme right have really come to resent and not trust any kind of government assistance that isn't just direct, sort of like you need temporary, like help because you're unemployed or something, because they see it as sort of creeping ideological control. In other words, it's assistance, it's control disguised as as assistance, and that I don't not only don't need that, but I don't want that, because I believe that I'm able-bodied. If you're able-bodied and you work hard and you don't basically are just a good citizen and everything, that you don't need government assistance. And anyone who says that it should be expanded beyond sort of like I sort of said, like, maybe disability, if you're truly disabled, or unemployment, temporary unemployment stuff, that you're basically either unknowingly or knowingly trying to let some sort of socialism, become the law of the rule of the land. So is that a safe summary of what the controversy is?
Sure. It's interesting. I'm often sort of on the front line of that, because I'm often asked as a doctor to write a letter to grant someone short-term disability, long-term disability, Social Security disability for mental health reasons.
Right.
And that's complicated for lots of different reasons, to have, that be an identity, and it's impossible to break out of, even if you want to, and you can, because who's going to hire you? And then if you have income and you have a home, how do you?
So the conservative argument, and even actually, quite frankly, a lot of sort of traditional liberal arguments, is I can see my uncle, for instance, who's again the Union Democrat, thinking this way, is that suck it up. If you're struggling, you need to work harder. And unless you're truly, just been dealt a losing hand. And remember, again, these are from Scots Irish who have been taken advantage of by the banks and have been foreclosed on by and all this stuff. It's like, you suck it up and you work harder to get through it. And anything more than just temporary help is just wrong. And not only that, but if it's going to come from anyone else, it shouldn't come from the government who wants to tell you how to think. It should come from your church. It should come from your community. It should come from your family, your friends, those sort of like more traditional institutions, not the people who want to, also, I don't know, take your guns away, or, stuff like that. So that's how people think, though.
Yeah.
So, whereas on, I think, the left side, I was waiting for someone else to jump in. It's like, hey, our social safety net sucks because, people get knocked down and they can't get back up. And to make it worse, we give Social Security benefits, for example, to people who don't even need it, because we don't means test it or anything, while people on the bottom rung get kicked down and barely can scrape together enough money to survive, let alone pay rent and get themselves together again to get a new. So I think there's legitimate views on both sides, but they sort of exclude each other.
I think they really do exclude one another, but I'd be curious as to what your uncle might say about a situation that was like the following. What if he had a child who was struggling in school and was not able to keep up in a classroom because they had a different way of learning? They had attention deficit syndrome, they were dyslexic, they were whatever. To what extent would he be supportive of going to the school district and having the school district provide special services for that child so that that child could access a reasonable education. That's a situation where the government intervenes, provides resources that are different from what everybody's getting in the public school. They're obligated by law to do so in certainly many states. But it is government interference in a different way in the education of that child.
Well, I don't want to put words in his mouth, but I don't think he'd have a problem with that because, again, Union Democrat understands the public good that comes from a good education, and everyone should have a good education. And if some people learn differently and need different kinds of assistance to get that education, that's fine. I think where Hughes really would have a problem with, and not just him, but where sort of a lot of people have a problem with sort of the Bernie Sanders or AOC version of the social safety net, is that it goes too far, is that it makes it too easy for people to say, I don't really want to, work that hard, or I don't want to go through the gauntlet the way that, my parents did in order to get where they had to, that kind of sort of like a drop, public assistance becomes too easy to get rather than just, sucking it up and pushing through. So that would be, I think, his sort of more view. Not that, because, unions fought for the, it sucked for working people, and there was no social safety net before unions. And they got not just the 40-hour workday and safer working conditions and all those things that Democrats traditionally believe, health insurance, all this kind of stuff. But there was still sort of this American idea that, yeah, we're all about unions making sure that the Gilded Agers and the robber barons don't take advantage of working people, but we don't believe in socialism.
So it's not government intervention, it's what and how and for whom. That's the problem.
Yeah, it's not. A lot of people like that are not opposed to government intervention. They don't complain about government intervention. They complain about ideologues on the left trying to control, what they think or what they're allowed to do in the name of social welfare.
And how is that happening in their view?
Well, actually, so we're going to come back to this later, but critical race theory is a good example of that. But another one would just be getting back to what maybe Jean is even thinking about, trying to think of an example here, but there's a sense that along with the assistance comes all kinds of ridiculous. Okay, here's an example. So my uncle, loves to go hunting, loves to do a lot of things that are very sort of like traditionally individualistic American rural kind of stuff, right? And because a lot of people on the left don't just think but talk like those things are dangerous and unhealthy and breed a certain type of individual that is a threat, that the whole talk of social welfare gets mixed in with the same talk of, taking those freedoms away. And no matter how irrational you want to say that is, the point is that the same people that talk about expanding that social safety net sort of beyond what folks like my uncle would think is even necessary or desirable are the same people that say, gun laws and no hunting is an excuse for people to have guns and, that kind of stuff. Right, Alice? I mean, am I making sense here?
Yeah,
Yes, yes.
yeah. I would say to be continued.
Oh, to be, okay, yep.
As I think we've planted a lot of seeds for
Yeah.
future dialogue. The next group will watch this and can participate.
I know we had the two people who identified as clearly more conservative are on next next
We
weekend.
get these two groups together later.
Well, yeah, the way it divided up was basically mostly based on who was available when, and then the rest of the people
I wondered why Sandy and I, who are more on the left, are in the same group.
Yeah,
and I'm
well,
waiting for the MAGA.
to be honest, the only reason there are two introductory groups is I couldn't get everyone on the same day.
Yeah.
But given that we're gonna have fewer people than I thought we were, if either of you do want to come next weekend, you're more than welcome to.
Okay.
Oh, great.
Send the invite. I'll try and make it.
All right. Sure. I'll include you then. Okay.
Parting words,
Adios.
Alice?
And
Not really, just
What about the writing? We'll get
okay,
all
yes.
this-
So you're going to get invites to groups.io. I think it's fairly self-explanatory, and I did send out an email with instructions.
I figured it out, so it's self-explanatory because I'm
Okay.
very impaired. So,
Yes. I'll help Alice with it too. But if you have any questions at all, just email me and I'll answer them.
Okie doke.
Thank
Alrighty.
you.
thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye now. Have a good